Last work session of the day. Welcome again, Miss Quinn. Thank you for being with us. You're just going to stay. Excellent. And Dr. Ramey, thank you for being here. I believe you've had conversations with all board members about this topic. And so who wants to, Dr. Ramey, are you going to take the lead on this? All right.
Good evening. It's great to be with you this afternoon to talk about the principal selection process. As Ms. Evans mentioned, I did have the opportunity to sit down with each of you to discuss this several weeks ago. And so I'll try to stick to our one pager that I provided there that really just kind of recaps the outline of the new process. And as you might recall, really the changes and the enhancements to our principal selection process at this point are geared toward the beginning of the process and taking a pool approach. The goals behind that to increase and diversify the principal applicant pool, ensure a clear and transparent process, as well as the similar process taking place across all of our schools and all of our regions, and then also provide for additional professional development for our aspiring principals throughout the process once they're in the pool. And those were the guiding principles behind it. Carolyn Hayden from our TAM team is sitting over there, along with Francis Ivy, our lead RAS. The regions as well as our TAM team have been very much involved in this. It's been a true collaborative effort as we've built this together. We took some of the feedback that we received from the individual board members and built that into the process as well. But it stays relatively intact to what we shared with you in the 2x2s earlier in the summer. And so what you can see on the screen behind me is really three phases for a new selection process. The first phase being what we're titling the pool selection process, where applicants find their way into the pool through three different steps: paper screening, a screening interview, and then an on-site screening activity. One of the things that the board members talked to us about when we met, almost all the board members, was expanding the type of activities that we took the applicants through during that half-day intensive on-site process. And what we're going to try to set up during those sessions are scenarios that get at a number of different factors that principals have to address in their role. It won't simply be a question about special education. There'd be special education layered with discipline, variance layered with evaluation. And because as principals, we know they're never facing issues one at a time. And so we'll try to generate scenarios that encapsulate a number of different things. Once individuals are selected for the pool process, one of the other pieces that we talked about with board members as well as the RAS was how long is an individual in the process. When I originally brought the draft to board members, we said, well, you're in for 2 years and then you're out and you have to sit out for 6 months. And there was some trepidation among administrators as well as board members about that approach. And so we've adjusted that. And while people will be guaranteed a slot in the pool for 2 years, there'll be a mandatory check-in meeting with either members of the Region Assistant Superintendent team or HR to see what's going on. And so it's not a 2 years and you're out. It's really more almost for the administration as it is for the candidates, so we make sure that we don't lose track of folks when they're in the pool process. There could be a number of reasons that are hindering individuals from obtaining a principalship, and so we want to make sure that if there's gaps, we're identifying those. But while we're a large school system, we still only have 25 high schools and 25 high schools. And there could be a time where we just don't have a lot of turnover. And so you could sit there and there might only be 1 or 2 vacancies. And that doesn't mean you're not a great candidate. That just means that we have folks that are staying in their seats for a long period of time. So we don't want to penalize you, but as a applicant, we want to make sure that you're still on our radar. We still care about you and we're still meeting your professional development needs throughout the process. Phase 2 is when we make that transition from advertising simply to individuals that want to be principals to then identifying those specific openings for a school for an individual year. This was also a point where we had some robust discussion with board members about the input at that profile piece of letting board members have that input on the front end of helping develop that leadership profile for the individual schools. And so you'll see that incorporated there under step 2 of phase 2, where along with the RAS, we'll also get input from the school board members as we develop those profiles before we go out and advertise those those positions to individuals in the pool. We see that when we advertise the vacancy, the change, and this is going to be one of the big changes to individuals that are applying for principalships inside Fairfax County, is that you have to be in the pool to be eligible for a position. And so we'll send those advertisements out, but you're only eligible for those roles if you're already in the pool. That's the whole point of having the pool on the front end, is start developing and identifying that talent earlier. So then the individuals in the pool would all get this announcement. Now, they don't have to apply for it, but one of the things we think is a strength of the pool process is if you're in the pool, you will get notified of a principal opening. And we think one of the things that was hindering some of our diversity in candidates in the past is that you might not hear of an opening simply because it was in a different part of the county, or because it wasn't in your region. You didn't even apply because, well, I don't know that RAS, or I don't know that principal, and so there's no reason for me to even throw my hat in the ring. We think this is going to help eliminate that, and we're going to make sure that we provide those advertisements to everybody that's eligible in the pool for that. From there, once individuals start applying, it looks like our traditional process. Candidates will be interviewed at the school level. There'll be a community school-based panel that will conduct the first round. After that, there will be a second round at that RAS level, RAS EP level, and then a final interview, step 3 of phase 3, with the superintendent, with then following the rest of our process with notification to the school board, and then selection of the principal by Dr. Braybrand as the superintendent. That's a quick overview, but like I said, we've shared this before, but I also wanted to leave time for you all to ask questions. And so with that, I'll open it up to questions from the board.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Ms. Corbett-Sanders.
Thank you, Dr. Ramey. And I also want to thank you for the outreach you made with each of the school board members in advance as you were developing this process. As you know, I have some concerns about ensuring that the unique needs of individual schools are taken into account as you develop the leadership profile for a school. But I would also suggest that the leadership profile for a school needs to be taken into context of the leadership profile for a pyramid. And so it may be very easy to kind of focus on individual schools, but then when you look at a whole pyramid, there may be some inadvertent messaging to a community based on how you fill positions. So I would just take that into account, that we want to balance out our approaches so that we have up front the information from the school board members about any concerns they may have of an overall regional approach that's being taken. And I don't know if that's given to the RAS or if that's given to you or it's given to both of you, because sometimes that might be the most effective way of making sure that things get heard. The other piece of this that I'm a little concerned when you said that you can only apply for a position if you are already in the pool. That means that we are becoming an insular system. And my concern about that, especially as we become increasingly diverse, and we want to ensure that our leadership in our schools reflects the diversity in our community, that we want to be able to bring people into the system from outside of Fairfax County Public Schools. And I think an excellent example of that is what we've done with the recent placement at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology. We brought in a top-notch talent from outside the system. It's not clear that that talent would have been in any of our principal pools. And so that would be the only piece that I would feel significant angst if we were to limit our ability to attract from outside the system. I can tell you some of our strongest principals have come from outside of Fairfax County.
And I don't disagree. And I think that that's something we tried to look at the beginning to see, that balance of internal versus external talent and where you need to pull from, and did some benchmarking against some other organizations around the nation. That's in the appendix, and they stick with their pool, their one pool for both internal and external. We've already started our advertising externally. EdWeek is one of the sources we're using, national publications, to make sure that we get that out there. The other piece that we're doing is there's 2 windows each year. There's the fall window and then the winter window, because right now we would expect that the vast majority of individuals that would be showing interest in the pool are internal, because this isn't the principal hiring season across the nation. But when we re-advertise in January and open the pool again, we will increase the outreach to external applicants to get their interest in the pool. And we think that we'll have an uptick at that point. And I do understand your point. Unfortunately, the approach we've taken in the past has not proven great results for external hires either. We hire about a 97% internal principalship as it is right now. And so looking at a different approach could be beneficial to us in that standpoint. But this is the first year, and so we need to put some things out there and see what works and be agile enough that while we'll stay the course on this new program, make those changes and make those modifications as we do. And we've tried to make that clear that this is a learning year for us. And so the last thing we want to do is to miss out on any great talent. And we've already made some adjustments in terms of what pieces we're going to require from external applicants. Right now, an internal applicant is hopefully talk to their supervisor about taking that next step in their leadership journey. And so one of the pieces for an internal applicant during the application phase is to provide a letter of support from your principal or your immediate supervisor. We're not asking that from our external candidates right now, because you might not be at a spot where you're ready to tell your boss, hey, you've been a great mentor, but I'm jumping ship next door, right? So we don't want to put people that are external to us in that position where they might not be ready to tell people they're looking for jobs. And so we'll continue to look at those nuances to help attract external candidates to the system.
If I could share one thing, I've always loved watching Ed Week, even from when I first got in the system, just to watch how it worked. There are actually some search firms that will put out on behalf of larger systems. It just says all principals, K-12 systems. We're really creating a strategy where we're going to put our brand out, saying the same thing that and it was a recruiter that helped us get the person for Thomas Jefferson, as I understand it, right?
Correct.
I think I wasn't here yet. So we're really going to kind of wade into that realm to do better on the outside. Part of it is 3% outside. We can do better than that. We can do better than that. So I think what you're hearing is we're going to review the data. We think the current data is not acceptable. We think we can get more diverse outside, and we think we can get more diverse, period, inside and outside. And we're really going to brand our own selves to the external market more than we ever have before. And I think while I wasn't here when this started, when it first came to me, I'm like, you know what? I do think we have a process. We've been doing it a long, long, long time the exact same way. And I think doing a few of these things differently and then coming back to you and seeing how it goes and getting your feedback has the potential to really pay us some dividends.
Let me make it clear, as I mentioned to you before, I think that talent development and having a cohort is a wonderful idea. It's just that I'm not sure, and it kind of goes back to our discussion earlier today about metrics. And our metrics we should say we want this percentage coming from outside our system so that we ensure that we have that continuous innovation. And maybe what you do is say, okay, after, this is the metric and define it ahead of time. After 1 year, you say whether or not you're meeting that metric by having a closed system, or do you need to revisit your closed system? But you've got to have that decision point somewhere, because otherwise we will continue to have this one cycle. And my concern, and I guess the other piece of this, is ensuring that all those that are in that pool get equal exposure across the county to the various regional assistant superintendents. Because what happens today is you have 5 separate little pools going on, and school board members for magisterial districts are saying, oh, that's all that's interested in that. And that's not necessarily what we want to have. And then I would this is the principal selection process, but I would suggest one longer term piece is whether or not we have to look at how long we keep principals in buildings, and whether or not it is I'll tell you, Dr. Brabrand with Verizon, for me to move up the ladder, I had to move into different positions and different locations. So I knew that for me to get to that top level, I had to be willing to try another place and another job. And I just think we need to kind of think more about that.
Ms. Darnett Kovacs?
Yes, thank you. And I too want to say thank you for reaching out to us over the summer. I think that was very helpful. One thing it's not in here, and we did have conversation about it. Under phase 3, when you talk about school-specific principal interviews and selection, this is on I guess your one-pager right there. We talked about how information is not uniformly shared between the RASs and the school board members. And I think, I would prefer, if there was a 2A under there, because it's not, I've worked with different RASs and different people communicate information differently. I really prefer to be kept in the loop as much as possible. And I think in the end, what that does is it doesn't allow for, an uncomfortable situation. I really think after the community panel, and I think it's on a case-by-case basis. It may not be every school, but there are some schools where, by nature of what we are elected to do, the community pulls us in. And I know it's not, I'm very well aware it is not my job to hire a principal, but I'm also very well aware that I may know the community a little bit better than, by virtue of living there for as long as I have, as opposed if I get a new RAS or something like that. So I would like a 2A where they would share with the school board members what the pool saw and said. Under phase 3.
Sure. And you're right. We did have some extensive conversation, and I shared that with and I can't remember in which order I met with you and talking to the board members, and there were some varying views on that. And I think you were right in saying that RAS are communicating that differently in terms of what information is provided at that point.
Right.
But are you saying you want to know what information is coming from the community, or you're wanting to know who the RAS are suggesting to move forward? Because when I had some conversation with the RAS about that, or my team did, and the RAS was pretty adamant they felt like that should happen in the process where it happens now, which is later at that step 4 rather than earlier on. But if it's about what type of information that you'd like to see that is a result of that, I think that's something that we could possibly take back and consider. But I agree with your point about it needs to be uniform. It shouldn't be some individual board members are getting one thing from RAS and other magisterial board members are getting different things from regional assistant superintendents. And so I think it's finding that balance and also finding something that's consistent that we can provide to everyone through the process.
Right. And I have worked with wonderful RASs my entire time. I have had it communicated to me under a step that I'm calling 2A, and I found that much preferable than being a 4A or a 3A.
Could you clarify where you're looking? Because
right up there. Right there. Phase 3. Phase 3.
So step
2, the regional assistant superintendent,
okay.
we're in between those two. Yeah, the community interview panel and so what, so yeah, I mean, but there were RASs in there. But see, that's, well, I think it's now, this is, what do you mean? Well, wait, let Sandy manage it. Let's
let Tammy make her point, and then
I
we
think
can
you know
go
my
back
point.
to you.
I would like to know what other school board members have experienced, those of us who are here, and those of us, because again, when I started on the board, I had it one way, and then there was a change, and then it became a point of needing to ask sometimes, and you know, it's It is what it is, and we are elected officials to represent the community, and the community is quite adamant sometimes about this. And I think if we don't share the information back, but if we don't even know what the community is talking about, it's very, very difficult to, yeah, period. It's just difficult. Leave it at that. So, that's my point. So I'd like to hear from fellow colleagues what they think.
And Ms. McLaughlin, you're next.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy because Frances is here, so she can let me know if I'm having amnesia. But the way that my experience has been on the board is at phase two, I definitely get a chance to kind of talk about my sense of the community and what kind of leader profile we're looking for. And then the whole process happens at phase three, and then at the notification at step 4 is where I come in. So I don't get any. Well, I mean, the only thing in phase 3, I know as much as the public knows that this is the dates that the community panel is going to meet, and then that this is when they estimate that it's going to move through. But let's put it this way: I'm not getting a call at 2A saying, okay, so the community interviewed the people, I've interviewed the people, here's who we're thinking of. I mean, I get it at we've vetted, and here's who we think we're ending up with. Do you have any concerns? And then,
What you call 3A as a
it's 4A, because see, you're at 3. Yeah. I'm at phase 3, step 4. Yes. Yeah. Well, and to be fair, when I reviewed this with Chase, I said that you should include the 2 primary district members and the at-larges. You do not. Yeah, you do not. Yeah, you don't need all 12 of us weighing in on a leadership profile. That's not even realistic. But I mean, I do know that there was a rare instance that came to my attention where somebody said that board members met with the candidate, and I said, wow, 5 years on the board, I've never heard of that experience before. So I didn't know, Tammy, at that point, like, am I just clueless? So I will say this. It's very curious to me, and I so appreciate how we've been involved to date at the principal level. I think we get an opportunity to really provide, hopefully, what's helpful insight. What's interesting is we don't provide any of this input on LT, and that's the ones we're supposed to be interfacing with. So I kind of found it interesting that on the one hand, we're being asked to advise the superintendent and everybody on principles, which is like a whole nother layer lower. I sort of thought it'd be the reverse, like, hey, you got to work with my cabinet. I want to make sure it's, what you're looking for in a leader in this department. So on the one hand, I felt very appreciative as a board member, the voice I've been given, and I've been very fortunate to have great RASs. And so I've not ever felt left out. But in other words, I'm okay with what you've mapped out here. And I, like Ms. Koufax, I'm happy to hear from other board members if there's something that they're worried about. But frankly, I have felt so far that what you've outlined here is good. I'm more to where Ms. Corbett-Sanders is, and I appreciate hearing from you all today that let's just see how this goes. It's an impressive collection of school districts that you guys benchmarked against. And in fact, I recognize them very much in prior work I've done. So part of me went, wow, everybody's doing it this way. And it's only because I think about what Ms. Corbett-Sanders said. We could have amazing outside candidates who don't know that a spouse is being relocated to the DC area. And they get here and they've missed the fall window to get into the principal pool. An opening comes up in like unexpectedly in November, let's say, and we can't consider them because they're not in the pool. So I guess I kind of am not so comfortable on this window of when you can get into the pool or not. Why aren't we just, if you want to apply to be in our pool from outside the system, like I'm fine if we say inside the system, you got a fall entry point and you got a winter entry point, and yeah, but if you're coming from outside the system, when you know you're relocating to the DC area and you send us your resume, we're willing to look at you, because I mean, in the end, we could be missing somebody like this amazing new principal at TJ, and I don't know why we want to restrict ourselves from good people. I like what you're trying to do here, which is to develop talent, and I think you can do it. So I guess, Dr. Brabrand, I'm suggesting maybe a slight hybrid, which is if you're coming from outside the system, maybe you guys look at being willing to go outside of your normal open, closed windows of your pool. I think that would be my primary thing. And then the only other question is, because we came off of the budget, it was slide 8 under bullet 3. Once the candidates are in the pool, the Office of Professional Learning and Family Engagement would support them as aspiring principals. And then there's bullet 4 with this professional development. Programs mean people. So are we now, like, is this workload that the existing staff can absorb and provide those 2 bullets? Or are we needing to, spend more money in order to do this new approach? If not, then that's cool.
We think that we're staffed between the 2 offices to provide this professional development along with the RAS and the EPs.
Okay.
And we're going to take programs that are in existence now and either revamp them or discontinue them to redistribute those resources to provide, make it more intentional and provide the resources to more individuals rather than a small group, which is a lot of our programs are dedicated to right now.
Right. And not to put too fine a point on it, but for bullet 3 or 4, where you're talking about the professional development, are we talking pulling people out of their jobs that day and having to get substitutes for them in order for them to get their professional development? Or, I mean,
some of those details, as I said, we're going through and we're seeing what works.
just something I'm thinking about. Like, ideally, if we're trying to minimize paying for substitutes.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not the goal, is to not pull them out of instructional time or to take them away from their day jobs. I mean, this is a leadership opportunity, a leadership development opportunity. And so one of the pieces is you want to offer something to somebody, but you also want to see their commitment. And it's really easy to commit to come to get your professional learning when I'm taking you out of 10 to noon, right? But we'll do a mix, but we're still working through some of those pieces, some of those specifics.
I'll just end on a really positive note. I will say, of all the things that, knowing for being vocal as a board member, I have been very, very appreciative of my personal experience in the principal search process as a board member in Fairfax County Schools. And I really feel that what we've done, where we've tried to incorporate board member voice to what Ms. Koufax was saying, we want our principals to be successful. We want our leadership team and superintendent to be successful. And so our voice hopefully is always seen as added information that helps you in that selection process. And I feel you've done, this system as a whole has been very respectful. And I am sensitive to the fact that I can only speak for myself.
Mr. McElveen?
So what principalships would be exempt from this process? I would assume TJ would be exempt since they do use a national firm for the search. Is that correct? Is that something you've thought about?
I would not go in saying that any principalship was exempt from the search. I mean, personally, if I had my way, we would have done the TJ search. I'm that confident in what we can do in terms of our abilities that we didn't need a national search to do TJ, that we could have done that. And we're building a process to be the premier school system in the nation and to build our brand nationally. And so I wouldn't see there be a need to exempt any of the principalships from the selection process.
Okay.
Mrs. Strauss? Ms. Dr. Raybrand, did you have something?
I just want to say, I think one of the things, and Chase, correct me if I'm wrong, I've been away, but I think phase 2, step 2 is what needs to be tighter and more consistent within the organization in terms of the conversation between RAS and school board members with the leadership profile. That's my sense of it. And I absolutely believe if you all buy into this, that we're going to make those expectations clear that that's happening, because I think what I'm hearing a little bit, perhaps that's not been consistent in that process. I just wanted to share that based on what I'm hearing.
All right, I'll go back. Going back to Ms. Turner Koufax's comment on, it was really phase 3 to, okay. One of the things that, first of all, Dr. Amy, thank you very much for all the meetings that we went through 2 by 2. Very, very helpful. And I think you're seeing that by and large everybody thinks this is great. So thank you for putting in that time and for strategizing it that way. It was just very helpful. And I'm okay with all of this, how this goes forward. However, and I've always had a great relationship with whether it was a cluster area, RAS, whatever. I was thinking I've been at the principal thing for 34 years. And what is critical, I have found, and it's a very quiet conversation, it is somewhere between that phase 3 and step 2 and 3. You want to make sure that this is going to be a good fit. And you've already, if you have a good relationship, with your central people who are going to actually make the decision, they understand what the community needs, what's going to be a good fit. But I have found that a really good cluster, RAS, whichever, they look very carefully at that committee interview panel and are sure that however that one is scored, and while we want those panels to individually do this, I remember when we had the big change to doing community panels, and it was very controversial at the time, and the confidentiality, but you know how community members, they talk. And if in the end you all choose somebody who was not highly rated by sometimes key players in that community, it isn't going to work. And that's one of the questions that I will always ask before we get to the superintendent level interview or somewhere in there. And I say, how did your leaders in the community feel about this? How highly did they score them? Do you feel that, among these equally qualified people, because when you get to the panel, it should be all pretty good people. Is this a good fit for the communities and especially your vocal leaders? And I don't know where you put that in there, but yeah, but if for whatever reason the community, you start getting emails, and the person's been announced and the community says, wow, that it doesn't happen very often. I've only had that happen once, but it destroys the whole selection process. So it's like, how do you make sure that piece?
So two pieces. First, to Dr. Braybrand's point, I think that addressing it on the front end before we even get to the community panel is key to making sure that doesn't happen, to ensuring that the board members are involved in helping us define that leadership profile, because I think one of the things that I've seen happen even my short time here is that we think we know what the leadership profile says, but we haven't had that conversation. And so all of a sudden a slate comes forward and the board member has one idea of what the community is looking for in a candidate, and the RAS has a different one, and there's been no communication on that beforehand. And so, as Dr. Braybrand said, providing more clarity on the front as we develop that leadership profile is going to help us do that. On the back end, really, it's not up here because this is our one-page outline, but one of the things that we detailed out more is on slide 11, and Ms. McLaughlin talked about this a little bit. Under step 4, what we've delineated more for the RAS and for HR is that really before anything is sent to the full board, there is that call to the 2 magisterial board members to have the discussion you're talking about, so that the board members that are most intimately involved can have those questions answered, so that before anything is sent out to the entire board, that conversation takes place. And that's the conversation that we have with the RAS of where they felt that was appropriate, that it wasn't appropriate right after the community panel, but it was appropriate at that step 4. And so what we did is to make sure that that's in the process, so that every time there's a principal selection, every RAS member makes those calls and has those conversations so they can share that feedback, so that before any recommendation goes out to the full board, or there's any notification of the candidate that he or she is the finalist, that or that's going to be the finalist sent forward to the board, that those conversations take place. And so that was kind of the conversations where, yes, we think those are very crucial to have, and so we lined it out, but in the 4th step of that 3rd phase.
The other piece that I have found when there have been difficulties, where in the end the selection was appropriate, but where the community struggled, is if you have a beloved teacher within the school who's been there 25 years, is really not qualified to be principal, but wanted to be interviewed, and that interview is allowed to go to the panel, and then you have this explanation of, it's very hard to give the explanation. They love the teacher, but it's really, this is different than being a classroom teacher, and those are, you don't want to get into that position.
So we've hopefully made that conversation earlier.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yes,
we made it earlier.
yeah. So they're
and we
not
made
part of the panel.
And we made it easier because
Exactly.
they have to meet what is our now
Exactly.
FCPS standard to be a principal in Fairfax County, not a principal at elementary school A or
Right.
middle school B. Is we have a new baseline standard just to get in the pool.
So
and so
it
when
should,
that happens,
great.
those conversations should happen more naturally. They should happen earlier on. The PTA president can't come to the sitting principal in the RAS 3 days before the community panel and say, hey, there's this really good 3rd grade teacher that you need to interview for the principalship.
Yeah.
The answer is no. This pool takes place, and we have a process set up to help address those exact situations.
Right, or I will tell you, there are also flip situations where you actually do have a long-time sitting senior administrator in a school and actually has unusual qualities for that particular school, even though you've got a shining PhD from somewhere else, and you think, he's going to be eaten alive by this parent community, because we have those as well. So at any rate, this is why when we get to the end that,
But that person that you talked about that might get eaten alive by this parent community could be an awesome fit across the county of their school. And I think that our current system hinders that individual from getting that other opportunity.
That's
but
right.
by letting that person into a pool and shine, he or she's going to have a better opportunity to get to the principalship
That's
quicker in a community that more closely aligns with their skills.
I agree with you. Absolutely. Thanks. Alchik?
Yeah, so I don't know if you've answered this already, and I'm very supportive of this process. I guess I'm wondering, when we're talking about a place for outside candidates, if, let's say we go through the selection process from the pool, we do not find a candidate, did you already say if then do you go to a next pool, then do you open it up? Do you just wait?
That is a good question. So you're saying that
If we strike out, what's the next step?
we're building the pool to hopefully have between 100 or 90 and 120
I
candidates at any
understand,
given
yeah.
time. So depth to provide exactly, right? Because we're not just building a pool, we're building a pipeline. So we're developing talent the entire time as well. And we want to limit the number of individuals that are on an initial panel. We're still having those conversations with RAS. Is that number 3? Is that number 5? And so if you interviewed 5 and none of them were a good fit, we would first go back to the pool. Or we have those situations now where the decision's like, okay, that there's nobody that we think meets the needs of the school right now. We're going to put an interim in for 6 months or for a year. And so those options would still be available as well. But no, we wouldn't put a caveat in that allowed a school or a region, not that any of my great regional colleagues would do this, where we said, we'll interview 3 candidates, and if you don't like any of the 3, we'll just give you carte blanche to open it up and select anybody. We're not going to build that backdoor into the process.
So I guess even though and because there's a pool, there's still that possibility that we'll strike out, which happens, and I'm sure will happen again. And so in that case, you assume right now that the first step would be, let's go back to the same pool. And if that doesn't work, then, or I guess it depends on the school, which we do now, the situation. If need be, we'll put in an interim that will still be a possibility. You're not saying we absolutely have to find someone from this pool. We'll keep going back until we do. Okay. Thank you. Very supportive. And I do also hope that this will help us people find the right fit within the system and also from outside. So thank you.
Ms. Keys-Gamarra, you're
When I look at slide number 8, it looks like this pool is managed. Who is in charge of that? And
Sure. So the day-to-day management or facilitation of the pool would be by Carolyn Hayden, sitting over there on my left. Carolyn's currently our coordinator for administrative hiring and TAM. And so her role right now is to manage the process for our principal hiring. And so she currently works hand in hand with our regional assistant superintendents in the buildings to work out the procedures and the processes. And so she would continue in that role, along with our friends from our PD team to make sure that we're not only lining things up procedurally, but also that growth piece as well. And so it'll be a team effort. But Carolyn would have primary responsibility over the maintenance of the pool. And I should have said, we did not get to sit down and talk about this. And so I would be more than happy to sit down with you and walk you through it.
That you're finished with your questions? Okay. So I will say that thank you for putting standardizing the process. I think the pool idea is a very good one. I like the idea that people have more opportunity to go cross county. One small point and then one larger one. There aren't always 2 magisterial district board members. I have several schools where I'm really the only one. So, just making that point that you shouldn't have to look around for somebody who has 2 children there or something. So, it may only be one. And then, going back to Ms. Derenak Kofak's points and Janie's, I will say I do think it's important for the board members that know the community to be able to let you know about any minefields that they know about. And so some of that can happen at if you go up, I guess, if you go up to where we're helping with the profile, you can have input there, and you can say, well, I know this is a school that wants a fresh start. No, this is a school that wants everything to stay exactly the same. I do wonder, and I hear what you're saying about the RAS, but if you go to step, I think we've got it different, slightly different in different places, but if you go to phase 2, step 5, at this point, okay, so now we're on the other one now. Okay. If you would go back to the other one, the one that you had phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Right. If you go to the one pager, then this is just slightly differently than the one pager. But if you go back to that, where the RAS identifies 3 candidates to be interviewed by the community. Community members are going to know who these are. Staff people are going to know who these are. I'm not sure why board members couldn't at that point be clued into who the 3 candidates are. So I throw that out to you as We understand that it's, we have to keep all of this as confidential as community members have to keep it and staff members have to keep it.
Francis is joining me at the table. But at that point, that's when the RAS, that's no different than right now with the RAS doing basically a resume review and identifying the candidates that are actually going to interview at the building level. That's what that step 5 is in phase 2. It's not a public process by any means. It's really.
I know it's not public.
So the
Right. Well, technically it's not supposed to be, but
hopefully. I don't think I've ever had a situation, if I did, where the community members leaked it out. I have not seen that. So I do think that they take that responsibility seriously. But again, to the point of board members having some insights that might be valuable to you in the process, that might be a good place for board members to be able to give you some insights. But you have something to say about it.
If I can just share, and I'm in the middle of a principal selection process right now. And so I've worked with HR. We've identified our candidates. And it's amazing the talk and chatter that the school community, both teachers and parents, quite frankly, I've heard so-and-so has applied, or I hope that my person that's on the panel will select so-and-so. And in some cases, it's a fishing expedition. And so we try to be as confidential as possible at all times and not identify candidates. When a person is invited to the panel, they do not know who is coming before them. They learn and receive the whole profile packet at the panel that day. I held a panel today. At the beginning, at the middle, and at the end, we talked quite a bit about confidentiality and that they cannot leave the room and talk about the candidates and how that can interfere with the process as we're continuing to call back candidates for the next levels. If people who served on the panel are going back to the school and in the community and talking about how a candidate did, it can really interfere with this process. And so I was able to get input from the school board members prior to, very similar to what you're saying in phase 2, step 2, in knowing what the school board members, at least on the magisterial side, what suggestions they had and what concerns and challenges that we should have. And I think that I really like that step and think it should be a practice across all the regions.
So school board members are used to keeping things confidential. So I again, will say I don't know why we couldn't be brought into that conversation there.
Well, it would be very unique. None of the divisions we benchmarked against, and I've not seen a process where school board has been involved that early in the selection of the principal for schools. And I think it also sets up a slippery slope. There's a fine line between being informed and a school board member saying, well, I've heard such and such about a candidate, that person can't be interviewed. I think that it sets up a situation where there could be concerns about what the involvement of the board member is at that level. Is the board member then making a decision as a single board member, not as the board, about who's going to be involved or who's going to be interviewed for a specific principal position? And so as you look at it from a process standpoint and from a systematic approach, those are some of the pieces that come to mind. It's not about an individual, and I understand the confidentiality the board keeps, but as I look at the process overall, those are hurdles that start to develop if we inject board members on an individual basis into the process earlier on.
So that's a very good answer. I do. I understand that you have threaded a needle there very well, very diplomatically. So let's just say, I'll end it here. Other board members may have other insights, but if you get to the very end of the process and then you hear board members' concerns, I'm not sure that's going to be better. Mrs. Corbett Sanders.
Nice segue. Thank you, Ms. Evans. It really is the key. The key is the quality of the candidates that come to the community interview. And then whether or not the input from the community members is considered to be valued. And what we have had in certain situations is where community members have, after the fact, come back and said, not a single community member supported that candidate. It was purely from other sources. And when you have that type of discourse in the community, that's a problem. Or the other piece is the community members will say, that's the quality that you provided to us for this particular school or that particular school. And because it's focused on getting a solution out of a very narrow pool, then it becomes problematic. And so that's why I'm glad to see phase 2, step 2, because in certain situations I've been told that, well, we have the same leadership profile for all of our schools. And you can't have, it's not a cookie cutter approach. Our kids aren't cookie cutter approach. Our schools aren't cookie cutters. And so certainly our leadership in the building can't be cookie cutters. And the people that understand the unique needs of a community better than anybody else are those magisterial members that were elected to represent that community. And, some of us have lived in our communities for over half a century. And when you've been in a community that long, even if you want to avoid having conversations, you have to go to McLean, in my case, to avoid them. And so I would just suggest that you rethink on, just sharing. You don't have to share names, but sharing the interview. This is where we've put it out. We've received this many resumes, and we've narrowed it down to 3 candidates, and the 3 candidates have the following profile. Do you think that fits your community? It's not. And you haven't even gone through a community interview. You've just basically said, we want to make sure that who we're bringing into a community is somebody who is going to be able to inspire that community. Or you wait until maybe after the 2A, but the challenge is, if you wait until the school board, till phase 3, step 4, there's no stopping the situation. And if the magisterial members see something, or there is something that is brought to the attention of the magisterial member, who then, as you know, Chase, I will forward anything I get regarding HR because I don't want to deal with it myself. But it's something that is important for having that trust that you're going to get good information shared between the system and
Aaron, I think Dr. Brabrand wanted to speak to that point, right?
Well, let me share this. What I'd ask is, Dr. Ramey's done a great job. He's pushing hard, doing something different. I'd encourage this board to give this process a try. I'm certainly willing to come back and talk about other things later. I do want to say a couple things to you. One, I think one of the issues that's been, as I listen, is we haven't had phase 2, step 2 consistent in this division. And it's caused consternation among some board members that are getting a different set of information and a different relationship with the RAS. We got to tighten it up, or this is gonna be an issue. That's what I hear some board members saying. The other is, I would tell board members, I already, even since July, after my step, have gone back based on board member concerns and hit pause. So there is a place there at step 4 for board members to go, oh, Scott, I think you need to think carefully. And I'd ask you, with this particular superintendent that you've hired, Chase said something I think it's important. Large systems don't have this other piece that you're asking for. We need to be careful about the over-politicization of the principalship. We want to keep, it's that thin blue line of you are there, you are elected, you want to be the voice of the community. But I also think it's important that the superintendent is the one who's making the final determination about who the principal is. I ask that you give this a shot, and if you still have concerns, and this is a nugget for me, that perhaps our RAS getting a more consistent structure among the conversations that they're having with you in phase 2, step 2, and frankly then in phase 3, step 4. And if you're not satisfied with the kind of conversation you're getting, you need to let me know so that I can follow up appropriately, or with Dr. Lockard, who of course directly supervises RAS.
Ms. Corbett-Sanders, did you have more questions or comments at this point?
I think that this is a serious concern given what has occurred in the past and the inconsistency across the regions and across the school board members, the magisterial members. It's very clear that Mrs. Strauss has been provided information at multiple points, and it's been a very successful way of filling those positions. It's my understanding that my predecessor was treated in the same manner, and I would just urge that consistent treatment and making sure that people are listened to and have an input. It's not that they are, oh, we're having a conversation, yep, thank you, and we're done. And that's why I would be very careful in how it's executed, because there is a perception and a reality in this case, because we've heard about it right around this table.
Ms. McLaughlin?
Just to wrap it up, because I know it's been a long day for everybody. Not only am I been fortunate to have a good experience, and I do, Dr. Braybrand, appreciate how you captured let's go where this is and what Chase has fleshed out, and even in your short tenure, how you've already demonstrated your keen ear to listening to board members when we bring you the input. My only other thing is I'm thankful to live in a county that has community panels, very much so. But as I also have shared with my RASs, I would hope that we use the community panels in a way to say, does it validate and reinforce what the RAS and their selection team sees? Because in the end, someone presenting well as the shiny new penny and is just really, comes across great and becomes a panel favorite, but not necessarily is going to end up being the best leader and the best fit in that building. And so to me, it was, can we have the community panels that say, all things being equal, whoever the RAS and people think this is going to be the right person. The only problem I've ever seen is when the panel says, oh, heck no, and if that person were coming forward. But I haven't had that personal experience, but that would be the one where I would worry about our panels where if they're giving us a red flag, that's when you want to be making sure. If the panel says we like everybody and see strengths, then I think that then it needs to come down more to the superintendent and the RAS saying, we know the body of work of these different candidates, and here's who we want.
Dr. Braybrand.
I'm going to share something with you after 2 months, just because I want to, and I think maybe it's important to know. Yes, I think this process is outlined will make sure for sure that there's no red flags that come forward and get all the way to the end. But I do think the point that Ms. McLaughlin just made about the most popular of the community panel and that energy and dynamic. I want you to know, in no single panel that I applied for in Fairfax County Public Schools was I the top person for the principal panel, including the final school where I was made principal. I wasn't the bottom now, and I wasn't in the middle. I was among the top 2 or 3, but I was never the top. Part of it was this person, and because I went and asked for feedback. Those of you who know me, well, what's you're going to push too hard, you're going to make too much change, and maybe you won't listen enough. And of course, that issue of listening I shared with you even when I interviewed about trying to be a better listener in my first year as a superintendent in Lynchburg. But I just want you to know the community panel is powerful. Lots of other school divisions in Virginia don't use it at all. There's no panel. But we have to balance that community panel, I also think, with the experience of the folks that we have around the leadership team to help select good principals. And I just want to say that to you.
Thank you, Dr. Brabrand. I have Ms. Darren Kovacs for a go back.
Well, it seems as though we are kind of split about on this board. I think Ms. Evans, Ms. Corbett-Sanders, and I would like to have that 2A as I described it, and Janie, so that's 4 of us. I don't know, Dr. Brabrand, I appreciate what you're saying, and I do want to be respectful of your desire in an effort of compromise. I would say maybe perhaps we will, well, to me though, let me just say this before I present my compromise. It seems to me though now we are going to, some of us who've been fortunate to have information shared will no longer have that now. Like we will be restricted by this process. Ms. Strauss is not here to speak to this. I don't know if she's left or not. But I think I want the process to be a success for everyone involved, and there have been extenuating circumstances that have, I think it's worse to, as Ms. Evans maybe, I think the thing is worse to stop the process at step 4 rather than to have conversation at step 2 in phase 3. I mean, that's what you said, Ms. Evans, right? Right. Better to know up front before everything is said and done. And so I would, appreciate flexibility in this, even if we don't have to outline it. And I would absolutely have, want a review of this process after a year's time, and that would be a next step to review specifically how phase 3 is working. But I would still, Dr. Brabrand, respectfully ask that, whatever, I would like not communication doors not to be closed. That's my advocacy here at this point.
Were you advocating for a specific change or just an understanding of your advocacy in terms of conversation?
Well, originally I said I would like a 2A. But that seems under phase 3. That's what I originally said. It seems that there's, a little bit of staff consternation about that. Board members have different opinions on it. So in the effort of compromise, I would say, please just allow communications to be open, and then let's have a review of this process in a year's time to see how it's working for board members.
Okay, Mr. McElveen? Or unless, Dr. Brabrand, did you want to respond to that at all? Or no? Okay, Mr. McElveen.
No, I just wanted to add my support for having a 2A.
Okay. So I think this is where we are. You've had your conversations with all board members. You've heard the conversation today. Are you asking us to approve this, Dr. Brabrand? Are you going to, how would you like to proceed as far as what we do here today? So
This is an FYI of how we're making changes to the principal selection process.
All right.
I'd have to go back and review whether we've had a policy per se around this.
Okay.
Right. I mean, around this, I'd like the board to go with what we've created. And
Okay.
if there's a wanting to come back in a specified period of time and give feedback, part of what I understand, some board members have not had the relationship with RAS, it sounds like, necessary.
No, Dr. Rayburn, I don't think it's a relationship. If I can be very specific, it was administered very differently. So if you're a board member and you were given a 2A and then you were not given a 2A and then you were given a 2A, it's process. And it's just like, well, why am I not getting this information? So-and-so gave me this information. So that's what it is. It's not a personality at all. It is a process that was fuzzy.
Well, what I would say is, superintendent, it is my job as superintendent, my responsibility to hire principals.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have a chance to make my decision, my impression. I have to tell you, RAS have come with thinking one thing and after talking with me have thought another. I want to have an opportunity in this system that I'm going to be evaluated in, that I'm going to be judged in, to be the final say in the system before you all get notification, and then have a chance to go, oh my God, that has happened already in my short 2 months, and I have made alternative decisions. So I do think I would listen. I don't think it's up too bad. I already decided, blah, blah, blah. But I really believe in the opportunity to go through with my staff and find the right principal for the school. If we've done phase 2, step 2 well, I don't think there's going to be that many oh my goshes. And if there is in phase 3, step 4, I hope the board would have trust that I would listen and go, oh my gosh, I'm not going to bring in someone that would not take the system and the school forward.
Ms. McLaughlin.
I just was hoping to maybe reassure Ms. Koufax from what she'd said. Even from my limited experience in phase 3, step 4, where we are brought in, I do think that Dr. Brabrand, by our being notified at that time, the conversation's actually more substantive because Dr. Brabrand has now met the candidates. And if board members have any concerns at all, he's now in a position that he's actually met with the candidates, heard the RAS input, now gets to hear board member input. If we were to put in it at step 2A, he hasn't even met them yet. So he can't even appreciate what the concern is. And I actually, as a board member, would be a little worried that getting to him before he's had a chance to meet candidates independently, I think it goes to the point that was made earlier. Maybe Chase, you said it. I mean, step 2A in that phase 3 could have the optics of politics, and we can't afford that. So we are much better off staying at step 4 because at that point, no one can say that the board member, was putting undue pressure or influence on the superintendent, because we'll start being lobbied in ways that we won't even want to see happen. And so I will just say this, Dr. Brabrand, I've seen it. I have confidence in what you've just said. And to my colleagues who have not had as positive experience, I really do think between Dr. Ivy, who has taken over the RASs only just in the last year, and Dr. Brabrand together will look at making sure that this really gets done across all 5 of the regions. And then I would just also say that if you're a magisterial board member and a recommendation comes to you you're concerned about, there's nothing that prevents you from reaching out to the rest of us, because we all do get consulted. And if you're that concerned and you want to make sure that collectively we can have the conversation with Dr. Brabrand about something that could be serious or not for the system forward, that opportunity will be there. But I think we're better off sticking with this, and the candidates themselves, I think, will have greater confidence in this. We don't need to be misperceived in a negative light, and I worry we could be seen negatively.
Okay, so to wrap up, I think where we are is if we could get next steps. Ms. Derenak Kofax has suggested that we review this after a year. Is that correct, Ms. Derenak Kofax?
That seems, I mean, I don't know if anybody has any sooner. I mean, a year seems fair.
Would
I
it,
don't
would
know
a
if you
year
want
seem
six-
like a reasonable
Or
amount
does
of
people want 6
time?
months?
Yes, I mean, I think at least
But
a
I
year
think you need a
because
year.
it's one cycle. We
Right,
have to-
because you
if we
need,
go
you
any
need to
shorter,
get the
we won't have
pool
been.
and you need to
Right.
get, yeah.
Right.
And I would say just for myself, I mean, clearly, the superintendent is the one we rely on to appoint the principals. We just do. That's in your purview. So I think what we're hearing from some board members anyway is hearing from board members who know the districts and can give you insights as part of your process. So, all right, so let's look at, we've got 2, leadership profile for school needs to be developed in context of, I'm not sure I understand that.
Basically, when you're looking at leadership of an individual building, you're also talking about leadership of how the leadership in that building will work
With the
with
rest
the
of the
leadership
pyramid.
across the
Okay.
pyramid. And if you, we don't do that now. I'm sorry.
Well, so I think I was thrown by leadership profile? If it
I meant
developed in-
the profile of the principal. I consider the principal as actually the front line of leadership.
Principal profile needs to be developed in context of
How they fit in
of the entire pyramid.
Yeah, or the whole region
or-
even, but the entire pyramid.
Okay. Can
Because-
I get a sense, if that's what you intended, Karen, then we can see if does that do it? Okay. How many people can support that as a next step? Okay, that's a majority. Yeah, you're agreeing. Good. We like to see votes there too. Good. Okay, so review process in 1 year to specifically assess phase. Just in 1 year. Keep lines of communication open. Does that capture it?
Can I just ask a clarifying question, what we meant by lines of communication about the process, about a specific selection process? I'm a little confused. I understand. I just wanted to, I appreciate it, and get Mr. Kofax, because I would support probably one of those, not the other, so I just am curious.
Well, right now, we're looking at bullet 2.
Bullet 2. So I know you said that, but I guess I was confused. Did you mean in the selection process to keep lines of communication open, or while we're implementing this new pool system?
Process specifically. Speak to. I'm not speaking with the mic on, I'm sorry. So review process in 1 year, specifically under phase 3, statement number 2, to ensure that lines, it can be lines of communication are kept up. Share school board members and which candidates are
Tammy,
being
should we
put-
just say review in 1 year about school board communication? School board
Maybe
member?
that's it.
Because it might not necessarily be.
Right. I think
Phase.
that's fine, a
So
general
just-
statement.
yeah.
And we'll remember.
Yeah,
We've had a
1
lengthy
year,
conversation.
okay.
We'll remember what we needed.
And then that would eliminate
Yeah.
bullet 3,
Yeah.
correct?
Right,
Okay.
correct.
So, all right, if that reads well, then.
That's fine, Sandy. Thank you for the
let's
very
see
general statement that makes sense.
How many people can support that? Okay, that's unanimous. All right. So with that, we are almost ready, except Mr. McElveen has a big announcement. Or a small one, medium.
Very exciting announcement. So you might have noticed on the website today that the applications for the Student Leadership Development Program have been posted. Feel free to publicize those wherever you see fit. And then the students will need to submit their statement of interest to principals by October 16th. And then the school board office will receive them on October 27th, at which point they will be compiled for us to make our decisions. So again, feel free to communicate that to your communities. Thanks.
But will the school board office be communicating it for us as well?
So it's been sent out to RAS and others to encourage the principals to publicize it. I think if any of us are in schools, we should certainly reinforce that message.
All right.
Right.
Thank you very much. And with that, this work session is adjourned.